We often think about global trade, massive ships, complex logistics. But there's this whole other layer underneath, a fascinating level of strategic detail. Think about how companies handle things like tariffs. It's not always just, well, absorbing the cost. Often it's about these really clever, almost hidden tweaks to how products are made or shipped. And now, with the 2025 tariffs actually here, this kind of strategic thinking isn't just for a few specialists anymore. It's pretty fundamental.
That's absolutely right. We're diving into something called tariff engineering, which sounds technical maybe, but it's designing products, configuring them, even shaping the supply chain itself, all with the specific and, importantly, legitimate goal of paying less duty.
Welcome to Logistics Pulse, sponsored by Mothership. Skip the broker to save big on LTL shipments, or deliver same-day nationwide. For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, legitimate is key here. We're not talking loopholes or shady stuff.
No, not at all. It's about smart, proactive planning. It's baked right into the product's journey from the start.
For this deep dive, that's our mission. Let's pull back the curtain on this strategy. We want to understand how it actually works, across different sectors, what it means, and honestly, why anyone in global commerce should be paying attention.
Getting this right can mean some serious cost advantages, sustainable ones too.
Let's get into it then. Practically speaking, what does tariff engineering look like on the ground?
Essentially, tariff engineering means intentionally designing or maybe packaging or configuring a product so it fits into a better category in the harmonized tariff schedule, the HTS.
The HCS, right, the big book of codes.
That's the one. And seemingly tiny changes can actually shift a product into a category with a much lower duty rate. It sounds small, but it adds up.
And this isn't new, right? You mentioned it's been around.
Oh, yeah, definitely not new. The recent tariff hikes have certainly put a spotlight on it, but industries like apparel, electronics, footwear, they've been doing this for years, decades even.
Because even a small percentage point difference matters a lot when you're shipping huge volumes.
Exactly. Huge cumulative impact.
Now, this idea of commercial reality, it's not just about changing a label after it lands, is it?
No, absolutely not. That's crucial. Commercial reality means the way the product is designed and imported has to match how it's actually made and how it's meant to be sold. You can't just, tack something on temporarily or change it after customs just to get a lower duty code. The features, the configuration they have to be real, part of the product's actual life cycle.
It has to be genuine, built in from the start.
Correct. That keeps the whole system fair,
Makes sense. It's about designing with the tariff codes in mind, right from the drawing board. And the potential savings can be pretty dramatic, like 10 to 20% duty reduction from one classification change.
Yes. And you have to think what that means in real money. Take, say, a container worth $100,000. A 10% duty difference is $10,000 straight off the cost.
Wow.
That's not just fiddling around the edges. That's a real competitive advantage. And some companies have become incredibly good at this. Columbia Sportswear is a classic example.
Ah, the famous nurse pocket. I've heard about this. It's such a clear example, isn't it? Tell us about that.
It really is. Columbia, well, they seem to treat tariff classification as just a core part of product development, not some afterthought for the finance team.
So this pocket.
Right. On some of their women's PFG shirts, that's performance fishing gear, there's this small pocket, but it's placed quite low down near the waist.
Okay, and that placement is the key.
That placement is everything, tariff-wise. A standard women's blouse made of synthetic fabric carries a hefty 26.9% duty.
27% basically. Ouch.
Yeah. But add that little pocket below the waist, and suddenly the shirt might qualify under different codes, 6211.43.1060, and the duty rate there, just 16%.
Almost 11 percentage points lower.
10.9 percentage points, exactly.
Just because of where a small pocket is sewn on. When you think about how many shirts a company like Columbia makes, the savings must be astronomical over time.
Absolutely enormous. It just shows, like you said, it's a core design principle for them, not just a compliance check at the end.
And this kind of thinking, it's not just for shirts and pockets, right? You see it elsewhere.
It's fascinating to see how this plays out across different industries.
Give us some other examples.
Take footwear. Designers might specifically choose fabric uppers instead of leather, knowing that fabric often has a lower duty rate.
Okay, material choice. Makes sense.
Or in the tool industry. Companies might package things very deliberately, maybe bundle individual tools together, or shift where the final bit of assembly happens, just so the whole thing qualifies as a kit.
A kit might have a different, lower tariff than all the parts separately.
Often, yes. And then there's the automotive sector. It's very common to import parts, not the whole finished car.
Right, to avoid the higher tariff on a complete vehicle.
Exactly. And then they do the final assembly, maybe in a duty-free zone, or sometimes right here in a U.S. factory.
So it's this deep knowledge of the codes. And then using that creatively in design, packaging, even where you do things. And it goes beyond the product itself too, doesn't it? Into freight operations.
That's a really important piece of the puzzle, yes. It extends to how goods are moved and stored. Things like bonded warehouses or foreign trade zones, FTZs.
How do they help?
Well, using them allows companies to defer paying duties or sometimes avoid them completely if the goods are just going to be re-exported later.
So it helps with cash flow or if the final destination isn't the U.S.
Precisely. It reduces the total landed cost. Another strategic lever, basically.
Okay, so switching gears slightly, but still related. With the 2025 tariffs now active, it's just as important to know what isn't hit by them, right? What's exempt?
Absolutely critical. Knowing the exemptions shapes sourcing strategy just as much.
So what are some key areas that are excluded?
Well, one really big one is semiconductors and related electronic components. Things like SSDs, displays, monitors, even smartphones are specifically excluded.
Which means for electronics companies.
It suggests that despite everything else, Asia could remain a really viable, competitive sourcing hub for those critical parts.
That's huge, given how central those components are.
Okay.
What else is exempt?
Pharmaceuticals and medical goods, another major category. Essential drugs, surgical gloves, most medical inputs, they're out.
For public health reasons, presumably. Keep those supply chains stable.
That seems to be the logic, yes. Protect public health, keep those essential goods flowing. For logistics folks in healthcare, it means relatively low duty risk on those inbound essentials.
Makes sense. What about cars? You mentioned parts earlier.
There's a nuance there. Auto parts, specifically for assembly in the U.S., might get duty credits, especially if they're not from China, and particularly in this window between roughly April 2025 and April 2026.
A temporary incentive then.
Seems like it. It could mean we see a bit of a surge in auto-related freight. You know, OEMs may be front-loading imports to catch that credit window.
Interesting. Okay, any other major exemptions to flag?
Yes. Critical minerals and some energy inputs. Things like copper, lithium, certain types of lumber are exempt. This seems geared towards supporting domestic energy projects and infrastructure building.
Right, securing supply for key national priorities.
Exactly. And then perhaps the most significant one for North American trade, goods that meet the USMCA rules.
From Mexico and Canada.
Right. Generally, those remain duty-free. There are exceptions, of course, steel, aluminum, some farm goods, but for the most part, that zero-duty status holds.
Which really underlines Mexico's role as a nearshoring partner, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It keeps cross-border freight very attractive and strategically important.
Okay, so understanding the exemptions is just as vital. Which brings us to the big, so what? Why do freight teams, logistics providers, maybe even people just interested in supply chains need to care about all this tariff engineering detail?
It's not just theory. This knowledge is a real, tangible competitive advantage. If you're a freight team and you understand HTS codes, you know about bonded warehouses, you know the exemptions, you can do more than just move boxes.
You can advise the client.
Exactly. You can proactively say, hey, have you thought about tweaking this design slightly? Or what if we routed this through an FTZ? Or did you know this component is exempt if sourced from country X?
You can actually help them lower their landed costs.
You're not just a vendor, you're a strategic partner helping them improve their margins. That kind of advice is incredibly valuable.
So understanding this stuff makes the logistics provider stickier, more essential to the client's business. It's about moving beyond just the transportation quote.
It absolutely is. Your tariff know-how can directly boost their bottom line. And in today's market, that's a huge differentiator. It's often key to winning and keeping that business.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the big takeaway feels like it's the small stuff that counts. Pocket here, a packaging choice there, how you route a pallet. These seemingly minor details are actually major drivers of cost and margin in global trade.
Couldn't agree more. Tariff engineering really sits right at that crossroads of product design, trade compliance, and overall supply chain strategy. You can't really separate them anymore. And whether you're deep in the weeds of logistics day to day, or you're just trying to understand how global commerce actually works, getting a handle on the tariff system and how companies navigate it is just Well, it's essential now.
Think about that. Consider how these strategies, this sort of intense focus on detail from the first design sketch to the final delivery, might be quietly shaping the products you see and the industries you follow. It's a powerful, often invisible force moving goods around the planet.
For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.